Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your Hurricane Outlook and discussion for Friday, the 7th of July of 2017. We have a lot to discuss today, so let's jump right in. Taking a look at the wide shot of the Atlantic Basin, the visible satellite animation, and we see our Tropical Depression 4 over here struggling in the face of very dry, stable air coming from Africa. We've talked about this for the last few days, so it's not much of a surprise. And this is going to probably be just a remnant low as it moves on off to the west-northwest here, eventually ending up in the southwest Atlantic. It'll still be a trackable feature. Like I said, the energy isn't going to just go away completely, but I doubt that it'll regenerate. The UK Met model created some buzz last night, the 00 run, I guess it was, indicating that this might try to come back. You never say never. And we know that some infamous hurricanes of the past have struggled out here, kind of dissipated through here, and then come back to life through here. You never know. And we don't have much evidence to suggest that this will do so, but that's why we keep an eye on things. Looking at a close-up of the system, and you can see it's really struggling. Just too much dry air around, and it's just literally eroding the system away. So we're not going to worry about this too much longer. The vorticity signature of it, just to keep track of that, not too bad. Still nice and round for the most part, though it is becoming just a little bit stretched, and it's losing its battle against that dry mid-level environment coming from Africa over here to the east. In the eastern Pacific, which I'll talk about in a moment on the from the National Hurricane Center site, we have this next system that's going to develop. And in fact, it'll be a tropical depression this afternoon, and we'll take a look at that in more detail in just a moment. But you get the idea that, you know, the vorticity signatures increase as these systems become better organized, and I think we're going to see that over the coming week in the Atlantic Basin. We'll get to that too. Again, just to reiterate here, the very large Saharan Air Outbreak here coming off the continent of Africa. You gotta imagine all of this hot, dusty, sandy air over the Sahara, and you get these blasts of wind that come off in the mid-levels and eject these air masses out, kind of like when we get an Arctic outbreak that comes out of Canada down into the United States, but these are not the same. But you know, it happens, and in July it seems to happen the most, and this will smother Tropical Depression 4 into oblivion here. And then we're going to have to start watching what's going on here over the west part of Africa, because of what's coming up. And we're going to get there in just a moment. First of all, in the eastern Pacific, another system, 100% chance that this is going to be a depression this afternoon. And if we click on it and look at the satellite overlay, it's pretty well organized in sitting inside this band of cloudiness. I guess this is kind of like a monsoon trough through here, kind of like a convergence area, like I call it the grapevine, and this is a grape that is ready to be plucked. Or maybe it's like watermelons along the vine, or cantaloupes, or whatever. You get the idea. And some of them ripen, and some of them don't. And in this case, this one will go on to become the next tropical depression in the Pacific. And you know what I'm going to tell you, it's going to move off in this general direction over here. And look, I mean, you can, come on, you know what I'm going to say. What's that? Stable air waiting for this, and so this will die out fairly quickly, and once again, the eastern Pacific will generally underperform. And another sign that eventually the Atlantic is going to take over. So that being said, let's talk about the future here. A lot of interest over the last couple of days, really starting to percolate last night with some of the model runs, showing energy coming off the coast of Africa and moving into the main development region. The energy is over here. It's not very impressive right now, but it's there in the atmosphere. And then you've got this monsoon trough, sort of a westerly wind component, and some of the lower levels coming in, and that helps as this moves from the east to the west and they converge. It's a complicated process, but it's there. And when I see that tail, so to speak, coming to the southwest out of Africa, I mean, normally we see this in August, it tells me, to watch, because eventually, like we saw in the Eastern Pacific, something's going to try to grow out of this, it does look like. And so this will be our next focus of attention. And the GFS indicating, if we look at the Madden-Julian oscillation, favorable upward motion in the atmosphere. Right now, it is in the Eastern Pacific, not in the Atlantic Basin to speak of. In the next 5 days, we start to become a little bit more favorable here in the Atlantic Basin, and out to day 10, more favorable even from there. And then on out to day 15, pretty favorable across most of the Atlantic Basin, and this is July we're talking about. It's not August. And the MJO, the Madden-Julian oscillation, can sort of do its thing anytime it wants to, but we usually don't talk about this kind of activity in July. Looking at the climate forecast system, and it is showing a very similar thing, that over the next week to 10 days, not very favorable in the Atlantic for the most part, in the next 5 days, but after that, out to day 10 and beyond, this one goes out to 40 days, very favorable over the Western Hemisphere, according to the climate forecast system. So let's take a look, all right? We have some very interesting things happening in the models. I'm going to try to explain this. So what I've done today, we're going to look at the next week in the GFS from the 12Z run today, 168 hours out into time. Normally I don't like to go that far out, because anything after 5 days really starts to become more speculative. However, in the deep tropics especially, if something is going to develop, looking beyond 5 days to maybe day 6, day 7 is a little bit more reasonable, because there's less overall variability in terms of what could happen down here in the deep tropics. And this is the area that we're going to be paying attention to. Once we have something developed down here, and you want to go look at days 8, 9, 10, 12, 14, when something could be heading towards the U.S. or into the Gulf or whatever, that's a big no-no to me, because there is way more variability at that point because of the upper features that are coming across North America that tend to make things over here a lot more chaotic. So down in the deep tropics, you have a better chance of these models being more accurate in the 7-day time frame, and at least in terms of steering, than you do in the mid-latitudes when you're looking out beyond 7 days or whatever. Does that make sense? So you're not going to see me posting day 10, graphics, because that's just too much variability. So all of that being said, my little preface there, let's take a look at what's happening. Let me scroll this so we can start the animation, and we'll watch it a few times so that I can point out what's what. So let's put it into motion. All right, so we're going to be looking really at the 48-hour mark, right about in here. There's the energy coming off right there. You see it? And I'm going to just kind of draw along with it here. There's the vorticity signature. It starts to increase by day 5, and then it goes on along, and then by day 7, it looks like it goes faster. It's just the model starts getting, I think it just goes out, every hour? And then once it gets to, I guess, beyond day 5, it's every 3 hours or something like that. So it's not like it speeds up necessarily. But you can see there, as it goes along that line, I'll take it away in a moment, the vorticity signature really gets going right there at about hour 50 or so. It's a little over 48 hours. And then it really starts to take off by about 96 to 120. And then finally by day 7, 168 hours out, we have a system ending up, and you can see, by the way, there's TD number 4 dwindling away in the southwest Atlantic. But keep your eyes right here, so that by day 7, a well-developed tropical cyclone headed towards the Windward Islands. Is that what's going to happen? Well, we don't know for sure, but this is a pretty strong signal, and it's not only from the GFS, But last night's European model showed the same thing, and it was actually stronger. I was going to pull that up, but that's an older run. And the new run for today that matches with the GFS, the 12Z run, that's rendering now. It's unfortunate that these models can't all be available at the same time. So what I'm going to do, starting tomorrow, assuming that this continues to show up in the two major global models, the GFS, which is this one, and the European model, the ECMWF, I will do a morning update, 10, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, to reflect the 0Z guidance. Those are your overnight models, if you will. And then I will do a later afternoon update, let's say 3 or 4 o'clock, and that will reflect the 12Z guidance that I can get the GFS and the European, and I'll use the European data from Levi Cowan's website, tropicaltidbits.com, very easy graphics to display. So there it is in the operational model. Again, this is the 850 millibar level. And there's a couple of things to point out here. Let me go back to the top of the frame and put this on the last frame. So you see at day 7, there it is right there, approaching the Windward Islands. And we've got pretty strong high pressure dominant over the Atlantic for the most part. The heights over North America, especially the United States, not too low. Don't have these big digging troughs at this point in time. That'll all come later, obviously. But over the Atlantic, right at this point in time, pretty thick ridging and dominant ridging almost all the way across. We don't see any troughs digging in like this that would necessarily yank this out to sea before the islands, but that could change. So the bottom line, and especially that I go over here, and this one is from Levi Cowan's website, this is the GFS ensemble at hour 168. And what does this show? It's like a clustering, if you will. Look at all of the different, the shading down here would be all the different model members of the ensemble group, indicating the density of how many of those different members indicate a tropical cyclone and the pressure that it would be down here just east of the islands. So this gives you an idea of the density. If there's just one or two, you don't get much of this gradient down there. You can see it goes from the lighter blues to yellow, and then sort of a denser area of orange, and then there's sort of this bullseye right in here that most of the GFS ensemble members are indicating that there will be development somewhere in here inside of a week. So you folks in the islands from Trinidad, Tobago, and points north, Barbados, Guadeloupe, St. Lucia, all of you, pay attention to this carefully. It's hurricane season, but this is July we're talking about. This would be valid July the 14th, by the way. We may have something to deal with, all right? So, that's going to put me, and I'm glad to do it, but, kind of working double time here, a morning update and an afternoon update, because this is important. And we do have these resources available to us, and, I can try to dissect it and explain it to the best of my ability. And so I'm going to do that until this either becomes, it's no event, nothing to worry about, or, get ready to batten down the hatches. It might be time. We shall see. So, starting tomorrow, morning update, afternoon update. Yay. All right? So that's it. Looks like a very busy time ahead. And I'm going to just say one more thing. I'm going to keep hammering this. I'm going to tell you something. I wrote about this in my blog today. If this goes on to develop and becomes a hurricane, especially east of the islands, and these are big ifs here, honestly, but if it does, I don't think there is any question that we are going to have a major season on our hands, because that would be really, really bordering unprecedented to have 3 systems develop. And even though TD4 never made it to tropical storm strength, and you could argue maybe for about 5 or 6 hours it might have been in that one window there, but that doesn't matter. It was a tropical cyclone. A depression is a cyclone, and we had Brett, and now this would be Don if it gets named, if this happens, and that would really, 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 come on. Only mid-July and we're already up to the D storm, and if it became a hurricane in the main development region, wow, what is it going to be like a month later, 2 months later? So really take that to heart and pay attention and be ready to act all over the Atlantic Basin here where you guys are watching this from. If you have interests, business interests, tourist interests, whatever, this is the season to really pay attention to. It looks like it's going to mean business. Hopefully everything turns out okay, but I say often in my talks that hope by itself is never a planning tool. So keep that in mind. Have a great rest of your Friday. I'm Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. As always, thanks for your time and attention. I'll be back with you twice from now on, for the next few days anyway, throughout the weekend and beyond. So I'll talk to you again tomorrow morning.